tempe chinle yar ngoda pege drolo zambe ze parache pande lame shabla solvade Omo a guru vajradara sumati munisha sanekar Uta vardani shri badra varsa manya sarva siddhi hum hum Oma guru vajradara sumati munisha sanekar Uta vardani shri badra varsa manya sarva siddhi hum hum Oma Guru Vajradara Sumati Munisha Sanekar Uta Vardani Shri Badra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Hum Oma Guru Vajradara Sumati Munisha Sanekar Uta Vardani Shri Badra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Oma Guru Vajradara Sumati Munisha Sanekar Uta Vardani Shri Badra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Hum Oma Guru Vajradara Sumati Munisha Uta Vardani Shri Badra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Pakyuke Kudan da Gilu Pakyuke Sundan da Ginga Pakyuke Tudan da Giyi Tünyerme Çıktı Çingi Olo Makyuke Kudan da Gilu Makyuke sundan da ginga, makyuke tudan da giyi, tünyerme çıktı çingi yolo. Saşipü ki çuşi ameto, Tamare Rabalinga Shim Nyede Gyampadi Sange Tumikte Ulvargi Drokunam Dashin La Chöpar Shoyidam Guru Ratna Mindrala Kam Niryantayami Sangye Chedan Tsoge Chanam La Chancho Pardo Dani Kyapsu Chi Dagi Jinso Gibe Sonamgi Drola Pinchra Sangye Drupara Sho Sangye Chedan Tsogi Chonam La Chancho Pardo Dani Kyapsu Jinso Gibe Sonam Ki Drola Pinchra Sangye Drupara Sho Sangye Chedan Tsogi Chonam La Jancho Pardo Dani Keps Dagi Chushe Gibe Sonam Ki Drola Pinchra Sangye Drupara Sho
In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment. With the practice of generosity and the other perfections, may I obtain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Good morning. As we've said many times, wherever there's an interaction, there's a transformation. And this interaction is made up of different parts. When we meet, this interaction is made up of what we see, the smells that we smell, the energy we perceive. And so when I meet you, when I encounter you, this interaction that I have with you is made up also of you and everything that you are made up of. But at the same time, it's made up also of me and how I perceive, how I interact, how I see, interact, etc. Similar to the example of the singing bowl. When I interact with the sound and I transform, this interaction depends on what? What are the elements that make it up? There's the singing bowl, the movement that comes, the vibration that is generated in the air that comes into contact with my hearing, my sense power, my sense consciousness, and the value that I attribute to it. So it's a whole where my experience depends on the value that I attribute to it and also my sense powers, but it depends also on the sense, the object that is perceived. Similarly, any situation that we live, they're not objective because we live them through the filters of ourselves. But at the same time, we are strongly influenced and conditioned by the world that surrounds us, the choices that other people make, that other beings make. We're conditioned by what happens around us. These are called conditions, or rather, this present. The present is made up of where this force, the force that manifests the present as it is actually the past. The choices that we make, the thoughts that we've had, the things we've done, they gradually create interactions and create also a kind of resource that's called karmic force, like seeds that we're planting. And then in the future moment, when that future moment of the past that is the present, those causes that we created in the past, they add up to the reality of the present moment, which is called a condition. The conditions are of two types. There are conditions that are inner conditions and outer conditions. Inner conditions are thoughts in this present moment, our body in this present moment, and our choices in the present moment. These are part of inner conditions. The external conditions is environment around us, including the beings around us, their choices, their actions. So in this present moment, what I experience in this present moment, it can be only the result of past actions that I did, but for these past actions that I did, for them to give fruit, that also interact with conditions. It's like having many seeds, and whether a seed sprouts or not depends on conditions like water or the right amount of sun, the right soil, etc. So in every moment, our thoughts, our discernment, our physical state of being, these are inner conditions. What we interact with others, the choices that others around us make, what they say, the situations we live in our surrounding environment, those are external conditions. Our experience is the result of the union of the causes with inner and outer conditions. So we can't experience something for which we did not create the cause, and we can't experience a result for a cause without conditions, without it meeting a condition. It's like its analogy is not the best, but it works somehow. It's like saying, I'm free to buy whatever I want, right? But we need two conditions. We need to have money. I can't go to a shop and say, I want that. I say, well, you can't have that. And I said, but I'm free to buy anything I want. Of course, if it costs 1,000 and I have only 10, then the one who's selling it has the right to tell me that I can't buy it because I don't have enough money. That's when the conditions are present, but the causes are not. And in the same way, I can have all the money in the world, but if I want to buy something that's not for sale, I can't have it. That's when there are the causes, but the conditions are lacking. So what happens is, so that we can experience something, be it pleasurable or not, we need the causes. And let's remember that the causes are always in the past. Immediate cause or a very remote past. For example, if I take this piece of stick, this of wood, and I throw it, the action is done once I open up my hand. I make this action, and then the action is finished. But the stick continues to fly in the air. It's given the energy that was generated before. At a certain point, that force encounters another force. So maybe the presence of the head of somebody. So what happens? When that force meets something else, there's a result, a transformation. Similarly, when we do something, it's that moment where we are throwing, and then the action is finished. It ends there, once I open the hand, for example. But that action generates a karmic force, an inertia of movement. That inertia goes on, it continues. The difference of throwing a stick here, let's imagine we throw this stick in space where there's no atmosphere, where there aren't the two force that go against it. Because if I throw the stick today, what's going to have it fall? What are the two forces? Gravity and the atmospheric attrition. Without those two things, it would just keep, theoretically, it would just keep going. I imagine, I've never tried it myself, but theoretically, it would just keep going and going. So when a force is generated, that force goes on until it meets an opposing force or something that transforms it. So every action that we do physically, verbally, or mentally, every thought, every word, every physical interaction generates a karmic force, generates this kind of inertia. And behind us, we have an infinite number, an infinite amount of karmic force that comes with us. And every moment, every choice we make, every interaction that we have of body, speech, and mind, not only is it an action that creates this karmic force towards the future, but at the same time, it's also a condition to ripen a past karmic force. In this present moment, our actions have a double function. They are a cause for the future, towards the future. We're throwing something towards that future, but that same action is interacting also with a karmic force that was generated in the past. So it also functions as a condition for a past karmic action. So in this present moment where we experience the past and we construct, we create the causes for the future. So in this present moment, there are two types of conditions through which we can ripen past karmic forces. Inner conditions, as we said before, our own actions, our own thoughts, our physical state of being, etc., and external conditions, those of others. When I play the singing bowl, what's the external, the outer condition? The sensory object, the vibration in the air that comes to my hearing. What's the inner condition? My sense power of hearing, my sense consciousness of hearing, and the value that I attribute to it. And the result comes in sensation. We experience the result of past actions or done actions once that stick touches and boom, and that energy transforms. This we experience through sensation of pleasure, pain, suffering, or neutrality. The sensation is the way we experience the result of our past actions, our past karmic force. One important thing in all of this is that we are susceptible to conditions. We are not so powerful to say, come what may, it doesn't bother me. It's not like that. And what happens is, in our life, very sincerely, the experience that we have, was there ever a period in your life, which is longer than 1 minute, where there were not problems? There weren't any problems? Where one was able really to stay in a state of peace and bliss that was long-lasting? What I see is that we always have something that, in our opinion, just is not right. Even the body, it's its own nature. You say, oh, because I'm getting older. But look at a child who's just a newborn. Look how much he suffers. And what about the adolescent? And then as an adult, the definition of this body, according to Buddhist philosophy, it's a little depressing, but I mean, it's not beautiful, but it helps us understand a couple of things. It's called Sakche Nyerling Pumbo. This body, Sakchen Lingi Purbo, is where it's the accumulation. Sak Pumbo is a heap. Sakchen Nyerlen. Nyerwa Lempa means where the ripening of some kind of result. It's where it's the heap, the accumulation, the heap of the heap of impurities. The body is where the impurities are ripen and manifest. So our past karmic actions united with our mental defilements. So where do these manifest? They manifest in our body. And the body inevitably from birth on, since we're very, very small, has these manifestations of many kinds. And naturally, our interaction with the world around us is not always easy. The relationship with other people, they're conflictual sometimes. Right? What, when we say, oh, having a happy family is difficult, because having harmony among people means creating harmony among the mental defilements of everyone. I mean, you put many people together, when one is calm, finally, and joyous, and the other one maybe is jealous. And then when the jealousy passes, then the other one is sad, and the other finds his happiness, and someone else is angry. It's difficult to find a moment where everything's fine, obviously, it's not that in a group of 10 or 5 or even a group of 2 that there's some kind of synchronicity. Normally, it's not that a moment where it's not one at a time. No, one is jealous, one is angry, the other one is dissatisfied, etc. It's naturally that there are conflicts. So what I want to say is, if we need to wait for all the conditions around us were perfect, favorable in every aspect to transform our being in a positive and virtuous way, we'll never be able to do anything, because adverse conditions are present. Difficult situations are part of life. On a physical level, regarding interaction with others, on a material level, on an environmental level, or just surroundings. It's too hot, it's too cold, there are sicknesses, there's fatigue, there are fights, conflicts, because one does like this, one does like that. We lose what we have, or we're not able to get what we want. So a fundamental key for our own spiritual path, for the mind training, there should not be any excuse to not practice, to not train in love and compassion and wisdom. So this third point says, transform adverse circumstances into the path to enlightenment. When I play the singing bowl, let's remember our experience is the fruit of an external condition, that sound, an inner condition, sense power of hearing, sense consciousness of hearing, and also discernment, the value that we give, and the way that determines the way I interact with that experience, that add up also with external conditions. One more thing before we read the text, go back to the text. When I throw this stick and it starts flying in the air, we said the moment I open up my hand and that action of throwing ends there, and a force is generated, a kind of inertia. When that stick is flying hard through the air and it hits someone in the head, it comes into contact with something. What happens? That head of that person has that energy, that force. Once it's hit someone's head, is that force finished? That inertia, is it finished, or does it keep on moving? Maybe it turns into a headache. But that force is transformed. Let's remember that. Let's remember this marvelous law of physics that energy is not created. It's only transferred or transformed. This is marvelous. Marvelous to see that energy is never created and it's never destroyed. Energy, any form of energy, it transforms, it transfers, it transforms into something else or to something else. So when I have a feeling of suffering, what is that? That's the energy of past karmic force that, having come into contact with a certain condition, it transforms and manifests into that feeling, that sensation, like a pressure cooker that just releases all that pressure. So when we feel happiness and joy, what is that? That's the energy of positive past karmic force that transforms into this feeling of joy. So when we experience something, inevitably we are using up a certain karmic force that we generated in the past. It's the ripening of that karmic force. Even the concept that we just said, that sensation is one of the most the strongest experiences that we have. And sensation just doesn't come from nothing. It's a strength that transforms. It's a force that transforms. Even that which determines a karmic force as being positive or negative is that when they're transformed and they manifest into a pleasurable sensation, those are called positive. That's called positive karmic force. Instead, when a karmic force meets a condition and ripens into a sensation of suffering, it's called negative karma. This is how it is. And all karmic force, when they manifest their result into a sensation of neutrality, neither pleasurable nor displeasurable, that's a karmic force that we can call neutral. This is a fundamental concept. Let's look at the text. Nu chu adikpe kang wetse, kengang chanchup lang wagyur. When the environment and its inhabitants overflow with unwholesomeness, transform adverse circumstances into the path to enlightenment. Apply meditation immediately at every opportunity. The supreme or apply immediately. The training, the familiarization, apply meditation familiarization. The supreme method is accompanied by the 4 practices. Let's look at the first 2 verses. They go together. Nuchuk Dikpe Gangwetse. When the environment and its inhabitants overflow with negativity, not in the sense that they are suffering, but in the sense that the environment and the beings within, they interact towards us with a negatively. They have behavior that we don't digest well. The environment itself is too hot, is too cold, or any other condition that we experience in a negative way. When the conditions aren't positive, when they aren't good, and in front of these bad conditions, we experience a feeling of a sensation of suffering. That suffering comes from nothing, or are we using up a karmic force that we have generated in the past? We're using up a past karmic force. That karmic force, which is the primary cause of that sensation, was generated in the past, or is it fruit of the present moment? Let me repeat the question. This stick hits you in the back of the head. What was the primary cause for this pain that you feel in your head? Is it the place where you found yourself in that moment, where there was that stick was flying through the air? You were in the middle? Or was it the inertia that was generated, that force that was making the stick fly through the air? What's the primary cause? Is this the inertia, the force that was generated? But the fact that I was seated there is a secondary cause called a condition. Let me give you another example so that we can understand this better. We're in front of someone else, another person, and this person makes a comment or says something to us that upsets us. I mean, that can happen, right? This person says something and we're strongly offended and we're upset about it. Getting upset about it generates a feeling of suffering. What caused that sensation of suffering? The words that that person said, or non-resolved traumas, an incoherent view of that we have, and maybe those words were just, putting salt on a past wound of ours. A few years ago, there was a moment where I had 2 experiences very closely that really made me reflect, touched me deeply. The first was quite difficult. How can I say? It was in the common view, we would say that it was a difficult situation. But when I lived it, I would have preferred not to have lived it. But it didn't make me suffer more than that. Nothing special. It didn't upset me. I wasn't upset in front of this experience. And then a few days later, there was a situation, and as commonly, and we would say that it was a very mundane and banal situation, nothing. But I lived it heavily. And that made me reflect, how is it possible that in that first case that I was so good, I was so fine, this difficult situation that I faced so easily, and this other thing that was nothing at all, that really touched me. And what I saw was the first situation was, it was like a sound that reverberates within, and a sound that comes within, and there was nothing that sound could touch to then reverberate back. It just came in and then, continued, went out. In that second situation, instead, that sound, that experience found some kind of wound within, and it really reverberated something within. My own wounds, things that unresolved issues, and I suffered. So when I'm in front of a situation, that primary cause of that situation is what I see, what appears to me, or past experiences that have me live that experience in one way or the other. It's the actual past experiences as primary cause. So when I experience a moment of suffering of the present moment, the first thing to transform these adverse situations into, or circumstances into the path, the first thing is to not point our finger at the condition as if it were the cause. That's the first step. Because our tendency is to look at the condition and think it's the cause. And then what happens? It happens that you can't say this to me because it makes me so upset. So I blame the one who spoke to me. And then the cause stays there uncovered, let's say. And the next day someone says something similar and I'm upset again. And let me just have a side note to explain something that complements this I, which is a personal theory of my own, which could be right, it could be wrong. I am convinced that our system, and when I say system, I mean body and mind together, our being together, has an attitude, has something that when there is something that is out of balance, it will continue to float up so that we can fix it. Like pain in our body, the reason why we feel pain is like an alarm system to say, there's something that is not going well. You're not eating well. You're not sleeping well. There's an imbalance. Maybe it's your liver. There's something within that is not going right. And I want to show you at the wheel, that there's something to adjust here. That's the function of pain. Pain is very important. The problem is that often, what do we do with pain? We want to turn the alarm off without looking at the cause. Mental and emotional pain instead. Is this an alarm or not? Yes, it is. This also shows us there's something that's out of place. So when I'm in front of any situation that I don't live well, that situation itself is a condition that comes into contact and ripens an inner conflict that I have, that then has me live that situation in suffering. So moments of difficulty, actually, they're also like a reflection to show us what's not going right, what's unbalanced, what lacks harmony, what's out of place. And as long as I as I keep not listening, because the dynamic that we follow, what happens? The siren goes off, the alarm goes off, and we don't hear. We don't. We don't hear the alarm. We don't understand, and we just throw more wood, more fuel on the fire. It's like trying to, to put out the fire with sacks of gasoline. Because often, when there's a situation that awakens a wound or a trauma, something unresolved within, our tendency in that situation is to face that situation and heal it, or relive that trauma, reinforce that trauma, repeating the same unhealthy dynamics. So, that first step to transform adverse circumstances in the path is to see them with more clarity. Number one, understand that when I experience a sensation of physical suffering or mental suffering too, it's a karmic force that I bring with me that is ripening, is manifesting itself. And when it manifests, when it ripens, it automatically gets used up. What's important that as that negative karmic force is being used up, we need to be careful. We need to make sure we don't make any new negative karma, which is what we do often. Let me give you an extreme example. Here's a warning. Warning, do not try this at home. It's something for those who already have a certain level of preparation. Lama Ganchen, when he was quite young, he was about 15 years old, he went to live in the monastery of Sera. And when he left Tashilhunpo Monastery, with a very particular situation, we're not going to get into that now, he went to say goodbye to his master, Kachin Pimpala, he was quite old at the time. And he was actually disciple of the previous life of Lama Ganchen, Kachin Tsempala, and he had a lot of faith in him. And Kachin Pimpala was quite old, and he went to him. It's not that you would go so easily. You needed a day or 2 days to walk from Shigatse to Lhasa. It wasn't an easy trip to do every day. So he went to find him before leaving, and Kachin Pimpala said to Lama Ganchen, he said, Rinpoche, I have a special request for you to ask you. He said, okay. I want you to pray for me, of course, but I want something particular. I want you to pray so that before I die, that I have a terrible, terrible sickness. I develop a terrible sickness. I want to have a terrible sickness before dying. And Rinpoche said, Rinpoche told me this story. He was just a boy. He didn't understand anything. He said, what are you saying? I can pray for your long life, for your health, for your peace, but not for you to get sick. He said, no, I know clearly what I'm asking. He said, okay, if you say like this, I have faith in you. I don't understand, but I'll do it. After a few years, Lama Ganchen went back to Shigatse, went to find his master at Tashilhunpo Monastery, and he was very old. And he had a horrible sickness in his throat, and actually had a kind of tracheotomy. Or he had a big hole in his he had a big hole in his throat, a kind of cancer. He had a hard time speaking and eating, and with a lot of difficulty, he was able to thank Lama Ganchen. He said, my desire was satisfied. You prayed for me. And Rinpoche at that point saying, Lama Ganchen said, please explain this to me well. And he told him, this body which served me well in this life, it did what it needed to do. But now he's at the end of his trip. And before I leave this body, I want to leave some negative karmic forces that I have accumulated. I want to leave these here with this body instead of taking them along with me in my next trip. The moment in which a sickness, and I mean a sickness is an energy, isn't it? Has a very important energy. That energy is it is nothing, or it came from nothing, or is kind of like a pressure cooker. So he, with the awareness, he said, instead of bringing negative karmic force with me after my death, I prefer to leave as many here as possible. I'm already leaving this body. So before this body becomes a corpse, let it help me again to ripen past negative force. Do you understand this logic? You need a level of maturity, very developed, this ability to allow that negative karmic force to ripen in the body without losing that inner state of peace and joy. This is the necessary condition to be able to do what he did. And that's why I said, don't try this at home. It's not something for everyone. It's something for very few people. But you understand this logic, right? You don't need to pray to get sick. But when it happens, if it happens, or it happens if we have a headache or a cold, or we have a pain here or a pain there, or a more serious sickness that can happen too, when it happens that in the body and in the environment and in the situations around us, a negative karmic force is manifesting, instead of reacting with opposition, aggression, violence towards the condition, instead of creating new negative karmic force, we recognize it as a negative karmic force that we are bringing from the past that is ripening and using itself up. Remember, there's an enormous difference between using up a negative karmic force and purifying a negative karmic force. I use up a negative karmic force when I experience its results in the form of a sensation of suffering. I use up a positive karmic force when I experience its results in the form of a positive sensation. I purify a negative karmic force when the stick is still flying through the air, and I generate an opposite force that opposes it and stops it. So purification is when we're able to stop and eliminate a negative karmic force without having to live its result. So it's not by suffering that we purify. Purification is a process of generating a positive karmic force in direct opposition to the negative one. As if, okay, there's the stick that's flying, and I do something to stop that flying. I think about like a sonic wave, for example, a sound wave that is generated, and I create another one that contrasts that one and stops it. So, and that's why along our path we do purification practices, and purification does not come by suffering. Is that clear? Otherwise, we should make malas with little metal studs, and we can do purification practices by hitting ourselves with the mala. As we do purification practices, and generally speaking, they can come in three different ways, three different results. One is a karmic negative force that is very, very big, can be divided up into many small ones, because that opposition, the force of opposition, actually just like shatters something huge, and then they become something very heavy. Instead, the result can be very small and lighter results. So if there's a force that's coming, I generate this force of opposition, but I'm not able to stop it completely. And then the third is when that purification practice is able to completely stop that karmic force. Unfortunately, this doesn't come only with purification practices. It's also possible. It's also the opposite is possible too. We can generate negative karmic force that will block positive karmic forces. And this is what happens with anger. Hate and anger. One of the worst things about hate, anger, and aggression is that it's a negative karmic force that is generated in the present moment. And one characteristic that it has is that it goes in opposition to our positive karmic forces of the past. So we should avoid it. So now going back to the text, it says, when I find myself in a situation where the environment around me is not pleasurable, when I find myself with a sickness in my body, or a situation that is unpleasant with other people, or a material situation, first of all, I don't blame anyone, not even myself. Because that negative karmic force that is manifesting in the present is the result of ignorance. It's the result of selfishness, but mostly of ignorance. And the point is not about blaming. Instead, it's allowing that karmic force to manifest itself without creating new ones. Unfortunately, our tendency is to react with a tendency that is similar to the one that created the negative karmic force in the first place. Like the stick, I throw it, it goes around the world, it hits me in the head, and I take it and I throw it again, and I throw it even stronger, and it comes around the world again, hits me once again in the head. But it's not just one stick, there are thousands of sticks coming from all directions. I feel abandoned, and what do? I repeat that dynamic of nourishing that mind that I am abandoned and my parents abandoned me, and I find myself in another situation where people abandon me. So the point is to not nourish the dynamics that nourish that negative tendency. This is the first thing. And be able to see that it's a negative karmic force that is manifesting, and by ripening, it's using up, and that's positive. So we let it get used up, which doesn't mean that we should rejoice for suffering. It means that we don't go into opposition to this condition. Even often, it's very fine to take space away from my condition. It's not like I put my hand on the fire and I say, okay, no, the real cause of my pain is not the flame. At that point, yes, it's true that there are past karmic forces that are causing this pain, but it's better to take your hand away from the fire. But as an inner attitude, this awareness already helps so much. So let me just look at the text of Trijang Rinpoche for a moment. One aspect to transform adverse circumstances into the path is once we experience the results of a past negative action. Not we shouldn't oppose the condition. We recognize that it's a negative karmic force that is getting used up, but we need to also look into what the primary cause is. So the stick hits me on the back of the head. What's the primary cause? Where I found myself seated? No. That karmic force? Not even. The act of throwing the stick? Like saying someone hits you on the head with a stick. What's the primary cause of that pain? Is it the stick to blame? Is it the act of being hit? Is it the person who hit you? And if I say to you, so you should get angry with the stick. No. Normally, we get upset with the person, but is that person the primary cause of that action? Or is it his ignorance, his envy, his selfishness that is the primary cause that made him do that action? I mean, look at the war that exists and is brought to our homes daily through the news, all the violence that we see. That primary cause of that violence, where is it? In selfishness, in hatred, in ignorance. So the karmic force that we generate ourselves, that we then experience, what's the primary cause of that suffering that we're experiencing at that moment? Our own selfishness, our own ignorance, our anger, jealousy, our non-virtuous actions that are done based on this. And deeply, it's our ignorance. When we have a sensation of suffering, what's our natural and spontaneous reaction? Attraction, aversion, or indifference? Aversion. It's very, very improbable that we'd be able to have a reaction that is not one of aversion in front of a sensation of suffering. But the key is not feeling the aversion, but how I'm going to direct. How do I direct it? Where I direct it? Because it's all about really, why am I suffering? Where does this suffering come from? Who is to blame? I don't want to suffer. So when I suffer, I want to oppose that which makes me suffer. Right? And if we're able, you don't need a great realization for this. If we just open up our minds just a little bit and we see things a little bit more deeply, the cause of our suffering and the cause of adverse situations and also other people's behavior, it's all about, it's the cause is selfishness, self-centeredness, and ignorance. So if we were to direct our aversion towards the real cause of what we're experiencing, where should we direct our aversion? Against mental defilements themselves. So when you spit in my face, when you speak to me with aversion, when you speak to me when you act with violence towards me, and I'm upset about it, and because I get upset about that, I don't know how to act differently, and I generate naturally a desire to destroy what generates pain in me. But then I take a minute, I breathe, and I realize that what's generate this pain is not you, because you are a victim of your own ignorance as well. So I direct my I direct my aversion towards your ignorance. I want you to be free from your ignorance. I want you to be free from your selfishness. This is a form of compassion. And in this way, I transform an adverse circumstance into increasing love and compassion. I recognize that it's caused by my own ignorance and selfishness, and I don't want to suffer anymore. So I go against selfishness and ignorance even more, and by doing that, I increase ever more love and compassion along my path. It's important to understand that the force in itself, the first of aversion, is not negative in and of itself, and we can't do without this aversion. It depends on the direction that is given towards what am I opposing. And this depends on what I project the cause of suffering to be, the cause of my suffering. So in this case, as the text says, when the environment and its inhabitants overflow with unwholesomeness towards us, when we ourselves experience adverse circumstances, there's a verse of the Guru Puja that is very, very clear. Because within the Guru Puja you can find all of them with, it says, when the environment acts, when the environment and the beings therein act difficultly towards me, may I transform these adverse circumstances into the path to enlightenment. What is that path? Is increasing love, compassion, and wisdom, and increasing bodhichitta. Verse 96, should even the environment and the beings therein be filled with the fruits of karmic debts and unwished for sufferings pour down like rain on me. So I'm not stopping aversion. I allow myself to feel that aversion. Because naturally when faced with in front of suffering, I feel aversion, but I allow myself to see the actual causes of that suffering in me, and also the adverse circumstances, the causes around me. And I see that at the end of the day, take one, take another. Oh well, he did this, and he did that because he did that, and this happened to him. You said, oh, you did this to me. You may be going to you go to your own parent and you say, well, you did this to me. And the parent says, well, you don't know what happened to me. My parent did this. And you can just go back and back and back to infinite. But what is the primary cause of violence, of aggression, aggressivity, and everything negative? The primary cause is ignorance, selfishness, is hatred and anger itself, but arises from ignorance. But if I don't want that sensation and I want to eliminate what generates violence and that which generates suffering, where should I direct that force? Against selfishness, ignorance, self-centeredness. And if I want to eliminate self-centeredness and ignorance, where should I put my energy? In the antidote, which is cultivating love and wisdom. So if we're able, transforming adverse circumstances, these adverse circumstances, it's like fuel to nourish the strength we need for our own path in the developing of love and wisdom. Love, compassion, and wisdom. Are you able to understand this? Someone might say, oh, but it's very difficult. And I fully agree. But this is a situation in Tibetan, use this image. We have this saying, it says, if you stand up, you hit your head, and if you sit down, you hit your tush. In the sense, you don't have the choice to not work hard. Because when I'm in front of an adverse circumstance, and it's interesting, when we transform adverse circumstances, doesn't mean someone hurts me and I say, no, it's all in my imagination. It's actually doing good to me. It's not that. I don't know if you've ever tried to not get angry, trying to justify that person's action. This just doesn't work. Transformation of adverse circumstances is not trying to find adverse circumstances that are actually beneficial to me. No, I'm being hurt. This is a violent action. There's abuse. There's a bad situation. There's aggression. There's sickness. There's pain. There are difficult situations. Absolutely, yes. That obviously they can be seen and lived in a million different ways, but we're not negating what we are living. We are allowing ourselves to see that situation of violence, abuse, aggression, of sickness, etc., with deeper eyes. More deeply, when I see it more deeply, I see that that these things come from one's own mental defilements. And that's what I'm opposing. Obviously, if my hand is in the flames, I take my hand out of the fire. Obviously, if I'm in a situation where I am not able to live without suffering, without getting upset or hurt, a situation of abuse, etc., I need to get out of that situation. That needs to be done. There are 3 levels to face situations. The first level is where I see that I'm not able, I don't have the strength, the ability to be in that situation and not to act badly. Even if conceptually I know it's not the ideal. So what do I do in that case? I move away from the situation to protect myself and protect the other from my reaction, with the awareness that that primary cause is not the situation itself, but in this moment I am not able to not react in that way. So I create distance. This is in the Theravada tradition, for example, a lot of emphasis is given to this Hinayana tradition. And one unlimited desire, for example, strong attachment or desire, that's a mental defilement that is present. So if I have a strong desire and I'm not able to manage it, then I need to move away from the object of desire. But recognizing that the object of desire is not the problem, it's just that I'm not able to manage. And just a side note quickly, it happens, for example, in certain traditions, like in Thailand, for example, you see that monks cannot touch women. And I've seen many people that were upset. How's that possible? They're male chauvinists. And are women so inferior that they're impure, they cannot even be touched? Has nothing to do with that. The reason why, in that specific context, the monk has the vow to not touch women, it's not for lack of purity of the woman, but for the lack of strength. It's due to the weakness of the man, not able to manage feeling. But the danger there, if I move away from the object of desire, my object of anger, etc., because I don't have the ability to do differently, but I don't work on myself, if I just move away from the situation and I see the situation as a primary cause, the first time I'm in front of that object, I will jump on it with attraction or with aversion. This is that film that is like one of the worst ones I've ever seen in my life, called Samsara, which shows this, that man spends years meditating and then far from all objects of attraction and aversion. And then as soon as he gets out, the first woman he sees, he just jumps on her in the worst way possible. It's a horrible. He's just the worst of everything, the worst partner, the worst husband. That film just gives the wrong message, even the wrong message about samsara. But this, it shows that if I move away from an object of attachment, of desire, unlimited desire, of jealousy, of anger, or suffering in general, but I see that object as a primary cause of that potential feeling, I'm not resolving anything. I've just distanced myself, because that feeling's not going to manifest itself, because it doesn't meet the condition. But if we see that we're in a situation that we're not able yet, and I repeat, yet, we're not able to live it differently, we need to create distance. And in the meantime, we need to try to see what the primary causes are, emotional and also karmic. The karmic forces that were generated that bring that, and we need to put energy in the antidote in generating the opposite. Our objective is to be in that situation without reacting in that way. When we're in a situation and we don't act in that way, then we can be or not be there. It doesn't matter. It's resolved. So the second level is when I don't make distance, because I already have the ability to get out of my comfort zone, but not too much. So I'm able to stay there and work on myself. I see that situation as a mirror, shows me what I need to work on within, and I'm able to apply an antidote. That's the second level. The third level is where I recognize in that situation the energetic energetic characteristics that are awakened in that situation, and I'm able to use the energy to direct it against the antidote. The first one, I make distance. The second one, I see it as I see things have they are, and I work on myself using antidotes. And then third situation, I see the exchange as I see the energy of the situation, and I'm able to use that energy to direct. In the third situation, I'm actually transforming. So in the first situation, the first level, I'm creating distance from adverse circumstances to not have negative reactions. In the third level, I'm transforming. I'm actually transforming the adverse circumstances in the path, seeing this energy. Along this process, it's very important for us to know how to recognize our own weaknesses. in certain situations, certain things were able to transform, others were not ready to transform, and some were not even able to face in a healthy way, which is the second level, and we just make distance like we would in the first level. But at least generate this. We should start with small adverse circumstances, like traffic, for example. There's more traffic than I could have ever imagined. Oh, it's a great opportunity to practice patience, to see that suffering doesn't come from something objective, but how I live the situation. Traffic in that example, or I have a headache, or that it's a strength it's an energy that's coming. This is past negative karma that is ripening, and I'm experiencing this pain. Okay, wonderful. Okay, and then I do what I need to do. I have a massage, or I take a pill. And here, from the Guru Puja, it said, in the mind training, when the environment and its inhabitants overflow with unwholesomeness. Here in the Guru Puja, instead, it says, and originally there was a wrong translation, and then we've corrected it, and it says, it's verse 96, should even the environment and the beings therein be filled with the fruits of it, he says, of karmic debts. He says it's still wrong. It says, should even the environment and the beings therein be filled with the fruits of karmic debts and unwished for sufferings pour down like rain. Actually, he's reading an Italian translation that's wrong, where it says their karmic debts. But it says, should even the environment and the beings therein be filled with fruits of karmic debts and unwished for sufferings pour down like rain. It's correct in English. We seek your blessings to take these miserable conditions as a path by seeing them as causes to exhaust the results of our negative karma. He's saying there's an enormous error in the Italian. And even though looking at the text, the Italian, looking at the Tibetan, it could be correct, but it should be, as it is in English. Should even the environment and the beings therein be filled with the fruits of my karmic debts and unwished for sufferings pour down like rain on me, we seek your blessings to take these miserable conditions as a path by seeing them as causes to exhaust the results of our negative karma. That is, suffering that we're experiencing is a cause to exhaust, to use up negative karma that we generated in the past. Okay, let's move on. What happens is when sensation arises, it's a cycle that's generating and then exhausting. If I have a headache, first of all, I need to understand where my headache is coming from, as this alarm that's going off in my body, and not just stop it. If I take a pill or do whatever I need to do to eliminate my headache, what I'm doing is, along that process of the headache headache that's manifesting. There's a karmic force that has manifested and is exhausting. It's not that negative karmic force is like, how can I say? It's not that I have a headache and then everything's done. There's the manifestation and a certain amount, quantity of negative karmic force is used up. I mean, if I need to use up all my negative karmic force, I mean, I could have a headache my entire life and never exhaust it all. So it's extremely important to not enter that dynamic of thinking that we need to suffer to purify or to use up our negative karma, especially with our basis of monotheistic culture, religion. So it's important to not oppose it. There's a negative karmic force that is manifesting. We shouldn't go against it with aggression or anger, but just with the awareness that something I created in the past is ripening. Otherwise, the alternative is every time that there's a situation of suffering or conflict or difficulty, we set it aside and without interacting, we think it's just going to end. And what we don't understand here is that it's not possible for us to not intervene. Any action, even non-action, is an intervention, is an interaction. So if I take the medicine, I don't take medicine. If I take the right medicine or I take the wrong medicine, regardless of what I do, any action I do will interact with that karmic force that has been generated. It uses up more or less. It exhausts more or less of it. It's really important to not fall in the trap to want to suffer, to exhaust past negative karma. I just, on a side note, one day might create a little bit of confusion. Sometimes it's good to create a little confusion in this sense of just to ask questions and not be there with all your answers. Karma is very complex. One day, I don't remember what I was doing. I was with my master Ken Lakpala, and there was a situation where he said, "Okay, this is fine. You like this. I understand that you have money to buy this, that, and the other. But remember, when you buy something and you have this feeling of pleasure, you're not just using your money, you're using up also the energy, that positive karmic force that you generated in the past. There's nothing wrong with exhausting positive karmic force from the past. But when we use karmic force, positive karmic force of the past, when it exhausts, it's okay if that is also helping us generate more positive karmic force. But the problem is when we get into dynamics where we are exhausting something positive without generating other positive karmic force. In that context, it's not in the morning. I do so many positive things in the morning, and then in the afternoon, I just exhaust so much other positive karma. Because when we have any sensation of pleasure or suffering, and we'll see this in the second part of the text, our tendency is to increase our selfishness. When we have an adverse circumstance, the tendency is to increase our selfishness. So from suffering or from also positive conditions. So are these first two verses clear? There are many ways. She's talking about a case where there's violence towards herself. There are many ways that can be faced. One can cultivate patience. One can see that that action of violence towards him is a sign of one's own ignorance. It's not something against that person, but a sign of malaise of that person itself. What we're talking about here is when we're able to see that that adverse circumstance that we have in front of us, this violent action of someone else in this case, is just a manifestation of that person's ignorance, and this can be transformed into compassion. I don't want you to act like this. I'm not opposing you with aggression, aggressively. And here we can open up a whole world. And invite you quickly to look up and look at the colors that are on the ceiling, starting from the east. Here, the colors follow. East is white. When we follow clockwise, we go from east to south, which is yellow, to west is red, and north is green. These colors, among many other things, they represent the four attitudes that we should rely on to face difficult situations. The first form to confront a conflictual situation, the white, is the power of pacification. I enact the power of pacification and I try to influence that person through pacifying. I keep an attitude of peace, of calm, and that force of pacification helps that person pacify. That's something one needs to learn and try. When one is able to do this, can go on to the other level, when one has tried and knows how to do it well, the second level to realize, to practice, is yellow, is increase. There are certain conflicts where the attitude of pacification is just not enough. Maybe the other one is aggressive. We try to pacify and we see that there's no space to accept, to see, to accept that the peaceful attitude. So the second level is increasing. I try to not pacify, but I try to increase something positive. I help you what you need. Let's eat. I offer something good. Once I offer something good, I increase something good that helps then pacify. For example, if we're in conflict with someone, before trying to pacify, we try to do something positive and together. We give gifts. Somehow we try to increase something positive, and we find something in common. By generating something positive and pleasurable that will be the basis to then pacify. So when the power of pacification cannot be applied directly, we should try the power of increasing and to offer, to give to the person that we are in conflict with, or the person that is in conflict with us. And when that doesn't work, we go to the next level, which is red. Red is the power of seduction. And there are two faces to this seduction. Influence, we can say as well. There's influence through prize, some kind of compensation, or through punishment. They say, if you stop acting in this way, it will be good for you. But if you keep doing this, know that it's not going to end well. See, if you keep doing this, that, and the other negative consequence will come. So we use the strength, this of convincing, of influence, by using the prize, this idea of prize, or it's some kind of reward or some kind of negative consequence or threat. And often we do things because there'll be something, or there'll be a reward, or because there will be a negative consequence. For example, someone who likes to drive fast, does that person, why would that person drive within the speed limit? Probably because he doesn't want a ticket, doesn't want to pay a fine. What happens when there's this situation, a conflict? You try to pacify and it's not possible. You increase things, positive things, and it's not possible. The basis to pacify is not possible. You try all the tactics of influence, and it's not possible. And instead, that tension just grows and grows, that conflict grows. Then we move to green. Green is the force of opposition. The force of opposition is where we generate a force that is as strong, if not stronger, but never much stronger. Let's say as strong as the strength, the force of the other. You come towards me to hurt me. I try to pacify, I'm not able. I'm try to increase the positive part, it's not possible. I try to convince you in 1,000 ways. I'm not able to seduce you, to influence you. And then you come to give me a blow. You give me a blow, and I try to protect myself, or I set a blow to block your blow. But what's very important, it won't work. The green won't work without having passed through the white, yellow, and red. And the objective of the green is the white. Okay. These 4 forces, called the 4 sacred actions that one should perfect along the path, and to know how to use the power of increase correctly, you need to first have perfected the action of pacifying, and so forth. And within this opposition, the green, the objective is white, pacification. But if you come towards me and I oppose you, I'm able to stop with strength that attitude. Once I'm able to stop it, then I do a de-escalation, and then I move on to the power of influence, seduction, and then increase and pacification. I get someone, for example, and there's like organized crime that want to and they want to commit a crime. And I'm there quietly, and I'm very peaceful and quiet. And no, that doesn't work. And And then I say, well, let's eat together. Come over for Christmas. That doesn't work. And then I try to explain, what you're doing, this is not right. There's karma. Instead, if you're able to act this way, it'll go much better for you. I try to seduce in this way. And then you come to me and with aggression, and then I speak your language. I show you that it's not going to work. And once you realize that you are, I've got your attention, and you listen, and then at that point I try to show you that that's positive, and then I invite you for Christmas dinner, and then pacify. The danger, if we try to use one of the powers without having perfected the previous ones, the risk is that we increase the conflict. If, for example, I try to use the power of increase without having tried to pacify, then I'm trying to buy you. If I try to convince you without having tried if I try to seduce you without having tried to use the power of increase, then I'm manipulating you. And if I try to use force without having tried the previous forces, actions, sacred actions, then I'm using your same level of aggression and energy. Now let's go back to the test. But it says, apply meditation immediately at every opportunity. The circumstances are of two kinds. There are two kinds of circumstances. There are adverse circumstances and favorable, pleasurable circumstances. In every moment, in pleasurable circumstances and in negative, adverse circumstances, in all circumstances, try to practice bodhichitta, tonlen, mind training. Like the other day, we talked about this. When there's a moment of suffering, may every being be free from this suffering that I'm now experiencing. When there's a moment of pleasure, may every being experience what I'm experiencing. And I dedicate to everyone. In the same way, when there's a moment of pleasure, I recognize that pleasure is a result of positive karmic force, and I want to increase that positive karmic force if I want to keep on being well, having positive experiences. When it's negative, I recognize that it's a result of past negative force, and I don't want to create new negative karma, so I need to avoid acting negatively. And here we are practicing more and more altruism and diminishing our selfishness. When there's something pleasurable, instead of having a selfish reaction, we have an altruistic reaction. Something pleasurable, oh, may everyone enjoy what I'm enjoying now. We open up our heart. There's a moment of suffering. May every being be free from what I'm feeling now. May no one ever, I don't want anyone to feel what I'm feeling now. There's a saying in Italian that I wouldn't want this for my worst enemy. So may let no one have to suffer what I'm suffering, even if it's very small too. And by doing that, we increase bodhicitta and compassion in all situations. The other practice to do here, it says apply immediately at every opportunity. the meditation is, we said, was divided into, we have the meditation, the familiarization of ultimate, and into in the two types of bodhicitta, the one of love and compassion for all beings, and also correct view of reality, wisdom. So we also see that what we're living is reality doesn't exist in an inherent way, but we see that it's also subjective. So we should all familiarize ourselves with the lack of inherent existence, with both the object of suffering and the object of pleasure. For example, years ago, I was still fixated on computers at that time. And one day, I saw that a new model, a new computer model came out. What was my reaction? I want it. And I was going from Milan to Albagnano, and there was this store that I would go to every once in a while. They were able to get computers that I liked, that they were also maybe the ones that had been shown at fairs, and so they were cheaper. And one day I went by and I talked to the salesman that I knew. He said, "Yeah, but this model came out, but you know, it's not really good because this and that doesn't really work very well." And I remember that desire that just totally deflated, and I said, "Look how empty of inherent existence it is." It was enough to just change a perspective about something, and there's no longer the base to sustain that desire. So when we're in front of an object of desire, aversion, or attachment, envy, pleasure, jealousy, observe how what we see as existing in an independent, autonomous way, because that object of desire, it appears to us as being objective. That object of anger appears to us as being an object of anger in an objective way, and we're able to deconstruct it, and we can clearly see that it doesn't exist autonomously, inherently, the way it appears. If you can do this both with pleasurable feelings, experiences, and negative ones, and by doing that, we are increasing more and more the ultimate bodhicitta, the so-called wisdom of correct view of reality. And this means there are no excuses to not practice. Every experience can increase both our relative and ultimate bodhicitta, and there's always opportunity to practice. And then it says, the supreme method is accompanied by the 4 practices. The 4 practices are 4 actions that should be practiced repeatedly as a support to the training and the love and wisdom, to the Lojong practice. So they should be practiced as a support. Now let's look. Before this, Geshe Rinpoche, in the commentary, he talks a little bit about, in this process of transforming adverse circumstances into the path, something that's important is to not be afraid of suffering. And there was a moment where Atisha says to Dromtonpa, "Oh, my child, don't be afraid of suffering." And Dromtonpa says, "But Father, if I'm not afraid of suffering, then I'll suffer even more because I won't try to avoid it." And Atisha says, "No, because remember, because out of fear, being afraid of suffering, one suffers much more than for the actual potential suffering that could come. So don't what needs to be avoided are the causes of suffering, not suffering. Suffering is a consequence. It's not the real problem. It's the alarm that goes off. It's not the fire, and it's not what caused the fire either. Then if suffering is lived in a mature way, it reinforces us, it helps us grow if we know how to live it in a healthy way. So there's a whole part that is about not looking for suffering, but because it's not by suffering that we grow, but by facing suffering in a healthy way, we grow. When we're afraid of suffering, we put us in a position where we end up being, we put ourselves, we lose sight of the cause and we oppose the conditions. For example, if I have a sickness and my objective is to be cured from the sickness, not to stop the symptoms, and sometimes the healing process is hurts. I think about physiotherapy for those who have had knee surgery, or in Tibetan or Chinese medicine, there's some techniques that are very efficient, beneficial, but painful, like the moksha, for example, where I've never seen it done in the West the way it's done in the East, in China or in Tibet. For example, if you have tension or something, here in the West, it's herb that is lit, and so it's very hot. It actually will burn the skin. And here in the West, as soon as the patient says, "Oh no, it's too hot, it's taken off." But I saw once in Tibet, there was this lady. She was doing the moksha. I mean, she had an enormous scar. It's just like a big it was a big like wound, burn, and I asked her if it hurt, and she said yes, it hurts, and it could get infected, sure, but she was having trouble sleeping, and with this process of the moksha and burning, which actually is consequence burned her skin. She said, but she was so happy. She said it hurts, but I'm sleeping now. And even it was a little infected, and they were putting butter on top of it. So sometimes medicine is bitter, but if I'm afraid of the bitterness of medicine, then I see the healing process as more difficult than the problem itself, the sickness itself. It's like when we have a conflict with someone. It seems more difficult to face the problem than to just leave it the way it is. And this fear of suffering blocks us. It doesn't allow us to heal, to begin the healing process, to face the difficulty. And it's not because I don't face the problem that the problem doesn't go away. Often it ferments and it grows, and at a certain point it just explodes, and it becomes harder to handle, better to face it earlier. So we shouldn't be afraid of suffering. We should be afraid of our arrogance, our envy, our selfishness, fear in the sense that we want to avoid it at all costs. It's not something I want for myself. Let's go back to these 4 excellent practices. So the Supreme Method is accompanied by the 4 practices. Geshe Rinpoche talks also says that someone who never experiences suffering then ends up suffering for simple things. Instead, someone who needs to face and overcome many sufferings then suffers less. When I see, for example, the generation of my grandparents who went through World War II, who lived very, very difficult situations. No matter what happens, they're absolutely stable. And I see generations where we've never really had experienced anything very serious, but anything silly, anything difficult, the minor difficulty seems like the end of the world. So the more difficulties we overcome, the stronger we become, and the more easily we can face future difficulties. So we should be afraid of our own inability to face situations, fear in the sense that we should want to face them. So the 4 practices to increase, to support this mind training. The first practice is the accumulation of positive karmic force dedicated to enlightenment itself. Acting with awareness in a virtuous way to generate positive karmic force that allows us to uphold our process of development of love and wisdom. So the way to increase positive karmic force is mostly through offering. When I offer something to someone who has a spiritual development that is superior to mine, it's called an offering. If instead someone is like me or has less than me, less love, less wisdom, it's an act of generosity. In either case, it's by giving that we receive, using the words of St. Francis. And here it's the same thing. The first of the perfections, the first practice is generosity, because it's through generosity, this act of offering, this act of sharing with others, that we're able to create the basis, this positive karmic force that allows us to maintain and uphold a state of love and wisdom. So the first of the 4 practices is doing actions with awareness dedicated to enlightenment, virtuous actions directed to enlightenment. So we give the 4 types of, we practice the 4 types of generosity. There are different ways: giving materially, giving protection, etc. Either we increase the joy and happiness and well-being, or we diminish and help avoid suffering for others. These are the 2 actions. So we don't know really who is superior to us or inferior to us. So we just need to give and give. Buddha Shakyamuni says that a being is not able to to see, to judge who is another being or what another being is, and trying to do that is leads to downfall. So we just offer. If we don't generate the causes, positive karmic force, we don't have something, we don't have what we need to uphold, support our path. So we put effort into generating, to understanding the correct view of reality, etc. But when we have a feeling of love and compassion, how does it feel? It's pleasurable. When we're able to perceive interdependence and come into contact with the reality of things, this feeling is positive, and this sensation is a force that manifests itself. But we need to have accumulated it for it to ripen and manifest. So along the path, it's not enough to think and to understand and analyze and meditate. We need to also generate this positive karmic force like fuel that allows us to move along our path and experience and develop positive mental states. So it's by doing things of body, speech, and mind that is directed towards increasing the happiness and well-being of others, or helping them diminish or avoid suffering. This is what these actions should be directed in this way, to generate this positive karmic force, to act verbally, mentally, physically, so that we generate positive karmic force, well-being, happiness, increase well-being and happiness, and avoid suffering and pain in ourselves and for others. So there's nothing stronger than giving, and this giving is divided into two types: giving something or doing something for someone to help that person diminish or avoid suffering. If someone is hungry, you give them food, or you do something that increase their happiness and joy. These are the two types of actions related to generosity. And the best way to generate positive karmic force is through generosity done with awareness, physically, mentally, and verbally. The second practice, let's purify negative actions. On one side, I increase a positive karmic force, and the second action, I'm opposing the past negative karmic force. Because once karmic force manifests its results, I need to wait until that result has completely exhausted itself. At that point, it's too late to purify. When the stick has already hit you in the head, now it's time to think about the pain that it caused. It's too late to stop it mid-air before it hits you. So purification practices are extremely important. All great masters that I know, those still alive, those who also important historical figures. The more developed the master was or is, spiritually speaking, the more importance he gave or she gave to purification practices. Like Lama Tsongkhapa himself, we can't even imagine what he did. Today we say, do 100 prostrations a day. It seems impossible. It's too tiring. But where Lama Tsongkhapa did prostrations was in a kind of cave we have over there above the door. If you see, there's a part towards the left. There's some images of masters. These are the retreat companions of Lama Tsongkhapa when he did this retreat in this place called Okachuling. And where he did it, the floor, it's made of stone, is absolutely dented by just his body doing prostrations. And where he made the mandala offering, for example, usually there's a basis on which one makes the mandala offering, where with your wrist you go around 3 times in one direction and 3 times in the other. So you get you purify negativities, and then you ask to receive the positive things. The basis on which he did the mandala offering was a stone, and that too is absolutely polished and marked by his wrist and the movements. So these great masters, they know that causes bring results, and they know that if we want to get out of the cycle of suffering, we recognize that we have this past negative karma together with this negative conditioning. So we really need to avoid these situations. We need to oppose them. So the practice of purification, there are many different practices possible, but it should be done on the basis of the 4 powers to fully purify. The first power is generating an attitude that's opposite to the one we had in the moment of that non-virtuous action. If I did that action with hate, I need to generate love. I need to have an attitude that's opposite what I had when I did that negative action. And to do that, I need to start from a basis, which is the motivation, this inner state. Generally speaking, our negative actions are caused by selfishness, self-centeredness, and they can be directed towards sentient beings or holy beings, those who are spiritually more developed than me or not. So to have the basis to purify, we need an attitude of love and compassion that's altruistic, and the taking of refuge, where there's also love towards the holy beings. So at that point we feel love towards all. So we have the generation of bodhichitta and the taking of refuge. This is the basis to purify anything, any action that we've done, because it's hard to remember what we ate yesterday at lunch. We can imagine all the actions we've ever done. So we can do a generalized purification and to generate an attitude that's opposite the one that I did, opposite the one that I did the moment I did that negative thing. Then I go right to the root. Opposite to the root of selfishness. So I generate this faith and love. And if that's the basis, if we want to purify a specific action, then we need to generate the mind that is opposite the mind we had in that specific moment. The second power to purify is to generate a clarity, an awareness to have made a mistake, or we admit openly our mistake. Say, what I did I mean, it would have been better if I hadn't have done that for all of these reasons. The third is the determination, the sincere and deep determination to not repeat that action again. Even if we end up doing it, at least in that moment, we need a sincere determination. And this will help us at least increase the time between doing these negative actions. But you need a sincere and deep desire to not to do it again. And the fourth one is about doing something positive, something that will increase joy and pleasure in others, or another virtuous action that will keep someone from experiencing a negative, something negative like suffering. So first, at the basis, I generate an opposite mind, bodhichitta, altruism and refuge. Then, in love towards others, compassion towards others. Then I openly admit my errors. I recognize my actions of body, speech, and mind done through ignorance that generated a negative karmic force, and I take the commitment to not repeat them again, and then I do something positive to oppose what I did that was negative. And it has nothing to do with being forgiven. It has to do with generating a force that goes opposite the one that was done before. There's that inertia. I need to create an opposite force to block it, and that's the second part in this. That's the second practice that upholds this mind training. And then there are mantras and meditations and things that we can do. Also other purification practices, and they're all based on these four powers. The third practice, the supreme method, is accompanied by the four practices. The third being with an attitude of compassion and gratitude, make offerings to beings that don't have a coarse body, to create harmony and friendship. It's called making torma offerings to non-realized beings. For example, when we do the Guru Puja, at the end of the Guru Puja, during the Guru Puja, there's the tsogla, offering the remaining tsog. And that is taken out, and there's a certain category of beings, spirits, and for their reality, they're not able to nourish themselves from that which is not a leftover. So we give them something that we've already eaten or left over. That's the part that's taken outside. So the beings around us, those who live in whether they have a physical body or not, we need to adapt to their level and create a friendship with them. It's like I go to live in a condominium, then I make some gifts to them. Someone might say, "Oh, that seems superficial. You're manipulating a little bit." Yes. But if I get along with my neighbors, then I can meditate better. But instead, if I'm there, with my singing bowl or reciting my mantra, and that's creating conflict, that's going to make things worse. So we need to create harmony among beings. Geshe Rinpoche, for example, he told me that once when he goes somewhere for the first time, he always brings an offering to the beings who live there. And since you don't necessarily need to know a prayer or a mantra. If you go, you bring some fruit or some flowers, and simply introduce yourself, saying, I have nothing against you. I'm here, peacefully, and so with an offering as a kind of sign of peace. So also a sign of generosity and also gratitude. As we've seen, all beings have helped us. It's a way also to pacify any kind of potential conflict that could come up. This is the third practice. And there are many, many different ways that one can do it. And the easiest way is to go somewhere, bringing a gift, sharing something, saying, I'm here in peace. And if one wants to recite a mantra, you can use the 6 mantras and 6 mudras. In the self-healing of the self-healing for the environment, towards the end, there's the brief practice to purify the environment. And here we're talking about a subtle environment, and here you can use the 6 mantras and 6 mudras. And this is important. And even on a more coarse level, it also means that I live in an environment and I need to try to interact in a peaceful way. The power of increase in this case with all the beings that live here, humans or not. I need to interact well. When I go to work, I need to have a good relationship with my coworkers, act according to their mentality, help others have a positive relationship with us, to help us be a positive basis for our practice so we don't find ourselves in any conflictual relationships. It's true that we can transform adverse circumstances, but it's better to avoid them from the beginning. The fourth practice is the practice of relying on a Dharmapala, the Dharma protector or protectress, to protect us from beings who don't have a coarse body, that we're not able to pacify a relationship through the yellow. So it's interesting because those who don't have we generalize those without a body. We call them spirits, and in Tibet and Buddhism, there's so many different categories. But the point is, they don't have a physical body, and so we first try to pacify. If I have a loving attitude, kind attitude, pleasurable, respectful attitude, generally speaking, others can perceive that and they react and interact accordingly. There are also nice stories about this, but I'll leave that. So if someone has an attitude based on love and respect and peace, and that's the best thing, the best way to interact positively with beings, with all beings, whether they have a body or not. I mean, if you act with this attitude of love and respect, very often it's perceived, sometimes not, but very often yes. When we're in front of an animal, for example, a dog or a cat, or any animal, do the animals feel our intention? They do, and so do spirits. So this first level is to pacify. The second level is to increase. I give you the little gift, a little prize, if this animal comes and every time you give him something at the end, that dog loves us more, doesn't he? Hmm? It that's kind of a manipulation, um, and and um, when I learned this with the dog, at first I thought, well, I'm not going to give a little a snack, a gift. That's too much of a manipulation. But then I learned that it really works. So here we're using this power of increase here with the beings that don't have a body, the so-called spirits. But when we get to the power of influence and the power of opposition, we're not able to do that with beings with which we don't have a direct contact. So we need to rely on someone else. It's like I go to a new neighborhood. First, I bring my positive, correct attitude, but then there's our, but there's some kind of mafia there, you know. So, and at first, I try to, create contact to pacify, and if I'm not able, what do? I trust someone who's able to influence them. Maybe my uncle or someone else. I know he has got that right attitude that would really influence them, who knows, someone also who knows my peaceful attitude. I say, I'm here in peace, but I'm not able to manage this situation. And so there's someone who comes and protects me and says, oh, don't touch this one. This one protects me from that extortion, for example. Similarly, in the non-physical world, the so-called spirits, there are beings of every kind, very similar to the different kinds of human beings we see. There's some who are able to receive our gifts and with whom we create a positive relationship, and some not. And with those that we're not able to come into contact with, we need to rely on someone who can, not out of fear, but in our Dharma practice, when we're close to someone who is aggressive towards us, either we're at a level that goes much beyond, or we have this tendency to get into that same, to lose our balance and respond to that with that same energy. So we rely on a Dharmapala, manifestations of, some are manifestations of Buddha, some not, but they do have spiritual realizations who have chosen to manifest themselves with, through spiritual realizations to help those along their spiritual path. So they're called Dharma protectors. The function of a Dharma protector, of a Dharmapala, is to create the conditions on a subtle level, a favorable level for Dharma practitioners. It has nothing to do with obtaining mundane things like power or money. The function of a Dharmapala is to protect us so that we can have the best conditions for our spiritual path. Following the analogy of before, let's say I was born in a family, and in my family, my father, my mother, let's say that they've always relied, and also my grandparents, my great-grandparents, they've always relied on someone who has protected them from this organized crime, let's say. Even if I have never participated to pay my bodyguard's paycheck. Once I'm part of that family, I'm also protected. The, the image is a little wrong, but you understand what I mean. So I never asked your protection, but because I'm the child of, I'm a child within this family that is protected by you, then I'm protected. I've I've seen cases where that that there's maybe the child was not interested in being under protection of that bodyguard, but he was. That's in the same way when we take refuge within of a lineage. When we take refuge in our master has been protected by specific dharmapalas, and then it's up to us also to nourish a good relationship with the ones who protect us. And then of course, when I'm able to recognize my bodyguard as the one who protects me, then it works better. These are called dharmapalas. Over the centuries, at the time of Buddha, there were the Buddhas of the four directions. They're the protectors of the four directions at the time of Buddha. This is true, and over the centuries, other Dharma protectors have manifested and have created very close relationships with various masters, and there are hundreds of them in Tibet. So who is my protector normally? The one that my masters relied upon, and I trust them. And in our tradition, specifically, when I take refuge among my masters, mostly in Lama Michel Rinpoche, and he relied mostly on two protectors, Palden Lamo and Dorje Shuden. And here you can see under Trijang Rinpoche, you can see the two images of one of Palden Lamo and one of Dorje Shuden, and they have the job, the role to to protect practitioners. I repeat again, they don't have the function of generating mundane things. Once someone asked Lama Ganchen to give the transmission of the protector Dorje Shuden, and it's normally something he didn't do easily, but another master also requested, and he gave it, and I was there translating, and at the end of the transmission, this person came he asked him to bless his lottery tickets. Was it Super and a Lotto or something like that? He wanted to win a couple million. I remember the face of Rinpoche Lama Ganchen. You can imagine in the Lord of the Rings, that remember at that scene where he just got enormous. So Lama Ganchen was always so kind and sweet, and instead he became so wrathful. He said, never even think about relying on a protector to get that kind of for that kind of result, because we rely on a dharmapala to have positive conditions, favorable conditions for our spiritual path. Because I mean, there are some rules that say in this relationship. So you protect me, but I need to have a correct conduct. You protect me, but I need to do the right things, the things that you want to protect me, the things that you want to protect. Dorje Shuden, for example, is this enlightened being, the manifestation of Manjushri, and he has the commitment to protect Dharma protectors who follow the Lama Tsongkhapa lineage. So if one practices the path correctly, transmitted by Lama Tsongkhapa, if you're doing that, you have his protection. It's important for us to rely correctly on a Dharmapala, remembering his real nature. I rely on him as a protector because I'm not able to do it myself, so that I can grow and continue to develop wisdom, compassion, etc. along my path. Let me give you a modern example that explains this a little bit. And it's a story, and it's far from our reality here in Italy, but in Brazil it's a lot closer. There was a friend in the Sangha in Brazil, had a situation, had a very difficult work situation. She was a lawyer. She was threatened. It was a very heavy situation. And just a few words, she was threatened and she needed to actually testify. She was supposed to testify the false in a very complex case. And if she didn't do that, they were very, very heavy threats against her. And so she called Lama Ganchen Rinpoche, asked for his blessing. And in the meantime, as this story was unfolding, one day she went to work in a place that I know too. And as she was there, there was someone there at work. Is someone in his personal, spiritual, this person is actually a medium that. So during the meeting, this one takes on this entity and says, "Don't worry, this person wants to hurt you, but I will protect you because you're the spiritual daughter of Lama Ganchen." And she didn't understand how that was going to work, but some time after, it happens that because the threat was very, very heavy. She went to testify, and something happened that seemed impossible. Those who were on the other side of the case, they didn't show up, and by law at that point, she didn't need to testify, and the case was thrown out. And she called Lama Ganchen to thank him. And another time, she said, "Let's go to this." There was this place where the medium was. She said, "Let's make an offering to thank." And he said, "We're just here to thank." Then the people at the door, no, come in. You need to stay for the whole ceremony. And then she said to her friend, "No, this medium said, these are friends, these are spiritual practitioners and children of Lama Ganchen and the young one, and they come from the light." So and she said, she said, I'll take care. I'll take care of this situation for you. I'll I'll um, I'll get rid of them for you. And this person said, no, 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 I don't want this negative karma on me or on you. And and she said, you can see that I can see that you are really the disciple of Lama Ganchen. Um, and I have this obligation to protect them. Um, so this is just an example how this is it's interesting. I mean, an entity that doesn't have a physical body has emotions, has these things, has and can even take refuge, can make choices to follow a path of spiritual growth. And these are what we would call protectors that are non-enlightened. So either they are. So if this is just an example of how that can be. I know that this is a subject that for many people leaves lots of questions or doubts. But it's something that, and we shouldn't live in this sphere, not let it take up too much room. But if the point is, if we practice the Dharma in a sincere way, we're protected. When we take refuge, naturally, the protection is there. For those who want to open up more, then there are instruments to develop this relationship more with it's possible to develop a stronger relationship with these Dharma protectors, and this is the fourth practice given to us by Geshe Chekawa to uphold our practice. So just looking back, we accumulate positive karma, we purify negative karma, we create positive relationships with the beings around us, whether they have a physical body or not, and we rely on Dharma protectors to create favorable conditions. These for our spiritual path. These are the four practices. And when we do the Guru Puja practice, for example, with Tsog, without details, all four of these practices are present. We accumulate merits we offer to all beings. When we make the Tsog offering, we're offering to all beings, holy beings and sentient beings. There's an accumulation, and there's also the opposition to negative past karma. So, and there's also the sharing of sentient beings on a subtle level with the Tsog offering, and also the Tsogla. And then there's also the part of relying on the Dharmapala. So these four practices are included within the Guru Puja as we do it here. And with this, we conclude the third of the 7 points. And what does this show us very quickly? That once we choose to follow, we choose to train in love and compassion, we should also try to face conditions in a more favorable way. So adverse circumstances need to be transformed, and positive conditions should be generated. One last thing: if there's ever an interference, a difficulty, a very important key is seeing the interference as an interference and not as something to follow. This is a fundamental point. If there's an interference, if I'm walking from here and I want to, and if maybe I'm go. If I'm going from point A to point B and something stops me and I see it as, if I don't see it as an interference and I stop and I talk and I lose time, then I don't get to my destination. So interference is really an interference when we let it fill up our space and we don't see it as an interference. In essence, we shouldn't wait for favorable conditions to practice, but at the same time, we should try to create favorable conditions to practice. We shouldn't try to look for adverse circumstances, but when we find them, we try to transform them. It's time for our dedications.
Losan tempe dreme sasumgi drowe munsel taktu ne gyurchi kewa kuntu yanda drame cheki pela longche ching sadan lamge yunten rabzo ne dorje changi kopa nyur tobe sho nimo dele tsendele Nime kuyan delek shing, ninsen takto delek pe, koncho sumke chingi lob, koncho sumke ngodrubo tsol, koncho sumke trashishon.
At dawn or at dusk, at night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to achieve all realizations and sprinkle the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness.
At dawn or dusk, at night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to achieve all realizations and spring all the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness. Oma huntam balame sangye rinpoche, kyo balame tamche rinpoche, drim balame gendo rinpoche, kyamne kuncho sumla che pa. Buon appetito, grazie a tutti.